Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Cheryl Jennison DeProza, and today we're going to be doing a really special live session from our downtown Chicago Experience Center, and we're going to see the MXA920 in action. See it, hear it, it's going to be super exciting. But before we get into that, we've got a couple of items of housekeeping. And just for fun, while I'm doing the housekeeping, I'm going to launch a little poll here so we can get interactive with you all. So here comes the poll at you. We want to know, what is your familiarity with array microphones? Have you used the Shure MXA910? Have you used other Shure array microphones, or even a non-Shure array microphone? Or are you super special and lucky and you've already played around with an MXA920? We want to get a good idea of what you've seen, what you're used to. And while you guys are taking the time to vote, I'm going to go ahead and go through the housekeeping. This session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. Usually takes us about a week to get it ready for consumption, but once it is edited, it will be available at shure.com/webinar. That's shure.com/webinar. It's a great place to go for all of our upcoming sessions, and it's also a great place to go to see all of our past sessions, the archived videos. We have a lot of great webinars across a myriad of audio topics, so please feel free to go there, check out our past sessions, and up your audio game. And then second of all, as we go through the session today, if you have any questions, please type those into the Q&A section of the webinar panel. We will take as many questions as we can at the end of the session. So type in those questions, but be patient. We'll get to as many of them once we've wrapped up the demo. All right, with that, I think we've got almost 80% of our votes in. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here, and I'm going to share the results with everybody. So it looks like mostly we have some MXA910 users, and then some people that have used other Shure Array and non-Shure Array products, and then just a handful of people that have used the MXA920. So they'll have a little bit of an understanding, more of an understanding of what we're talking about today. But for all of you, I think today's going to be super interesting and exciting. And so with that, let's dive into our presentation here. First of all, let me introduce you to our panelists today. Today we are joined by Doug Dobby, who is our Director of Mic Systems, Chris Lyons, who's a Senior Manager of Global Integrated Systems Marketing, and Scott Ramsayer, who's a Senior Specialist in Market Development. And they're going to take us through the MXA920. Looking at our agenda, we're going to start by discussing sort of the difference between the MXA920 and the MXA910. Then we're going to go a little bit into automatic coverage, some typical applications, and then, as I mentioned, we will dive into those questions. And so without further ado, I think that's enough housekeeping. Let's get into this exciting demo. Take it away, gentlemen.
All right, thanks so much, Cheryl. Chris Lyons here. And since 69% of you have actually used an MXA910 in the past, that's great, because we can talk about this in terms of how is the MXA920 different from the MXA910, which I'm sure is what a lot of you came here to find out. So let's dive right in and go to our first slide here, because it's really all about the technology in the MXA920. That's what makes it different from the MXA910. And there's really three headlines here. One is next generation array architecture for better sound quality. Another one is we've got a choice of square and round form factors for the first time, which make it fit in with different room designs more easily. And then last but not least, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about automatic coverage technology, which gives it a real edge and easier and simpler setup. So let's go to the next slide and let's kick it off by talking about sound quality. Now, Doug, I want to start with you here. The first time I heard a 920, I was really impressed with how great it sounds in a typical room. Why is that? Why does it sound better than an MXA910?
All right, yeah. For starters, this is from the ground up a new microphone inside here. Yes, the form factor might look suspiciously like the 910, but it is a new microphone in there from the ground up. Some of the advantages we have in here now, we've got a lot more processing power to do a lot more things faster than ever before. And especially for the acoustics of it, we've got a lot better directional control, and that's true even at low frequencies. The benefit of that is just more natural sound, less need for EQ. By the way, I'm in the room about 16 feet away from the microphone, so you get a sense of kind of what, out of the box, we've got like 30 by 30 square coverage. So I'm kind of like at the outer part of that, coverage area that we promised. So this would be an example of what it sounds like at, a typical farther distance. I can show you in the next slide one of those, differences in low frequency directionality. What we're seeing here, if you forward one slide, is the 910 had a coverage that became more and more omni at lower and lower frequencies. So this is an example at about 250 hertz. And what we're showing there is we've got, about more than 10 dB better directionality at that low frequency. And again, that equates to more natural voice, less overall room sound. Depending on the room, there's a lot of like low frequency buildup that happens in the room, and this can really help.
Yeah, and let's point out that that's the polar pattern at 250 hertz. Obviously, at middle and higher frequencies, those pickup lobes are extremely directional, but low frequencies, because of the longer wavelengths, are much more difficult to make a microphone directional, and that has always been the case since the beginning of directional microphones. So let's talk a little bit about the next thing, which is installing the MXA920. And one thing we've heard from a lot of customers, Scott, let's get your opinion on this, is that ceilings aren't just the straight block tile like I had in middle school anymore, and there's a lot more variation today, isn't there?
Absolutely, it's what I've seen everywhere. Ceiling grids are still to be found, and we're quite common, but architects are having fun, especially with boardrooms, but even training rooms can get a little fancy. So the square form factor didn't always literally fit or aesthetically fit, and so now with the round form factor, we can go just about anywhere, whether it's up close to the ceiling like you see there, or we now have 3 Shure accessories that allow you to pole mount it or hang it from hanging wire or even threaded rod, so that you can bring it down to whatever height you'd like. And at that point too, you might even be able to see the top or the back of the microphone. And part of the accessories are attractive covers that make it look sleek and nice from even behind, where we didn't have that with the 910. So pretty excited about the round form factor.
Oh, and one last thing maybe I can add is related to color. That's been something that has been very helpful for installers, interior designers, architects, that the mics were paintable. So these remain paintable. In fact, the square is available in white only, but does come with the ability to paint it, and also to actually pre-order some grill accessories to send them to a supplier to paint. I think a lot of times, somebody's actually painting the white microphone a different color of white because there are so many colors of white out there. So that's still possible with the painting aspect for custom colors.
One thing that I'll throw in, Doug, that I've had discussions with a couple people over the last month or so, if you have experience hanging an MXA910 using metal rope or something like that, one thing that is different about the 920 is the location of those hanging eyelets. On the 910, they were located at the 4 corners of the microphone. On the 920, they are in the middle of each side of the microphone. So shifting, I guess, from a square pattern to a diamond pattern, I guess, so to speak. So the orientation of those hanging points is slightly different, but you still have the hanging point, so it's still easy to do. And we now make those accessories available for pole mounting, gripple mounting, VESA mounting, to make it easier for you to implement that on a job site. All right, well, let's skip ahead and go to automatic coverage technology. That's really the real meat and potatoes of the MXA920 and where a bulk of the engineering work went. And that's partly in response to feedback we got from installers all around the world who said, I love the 910. I wish in some cases it was a little easier to get it configured to work in the room. And so we took that to heart and looked for ways to make that a more efficient process, or in some cases to make it unnecessary altogether. So Doug, let's talk about how is a 920 configured out of the box when you get it from the factory?
Okay, yeah. I mean, the 910 definitely was a powerful tool. It gave you the ability to customize to any room. What may have been missing is this out-of-the-box easy room coverage. So now out of the box, the 920 defaults to this automatic coverage area mode where there's a single coverage area that's 30 by 30 square. You can, shrink that or enlarge that or move that, left, right, up, down to, to cover the area you want. You no longer have to aim lobes. You basically have this square and you've got coverage in the square. You don't have coverage outside of the square. It's kind of that simple. So this isn't one huge lobe of coverage though. This is very specific coverage. Like if I walk to the upper quadrant and talk, I get a coverage beam right where I'm talking. If Scott goes to the opposite side of the room and talks, they get a coverage beam. So it's the coverage doesn't occur until it's needed per a talker. And there are 8 talkers that are able to be supported simultaneously inside this coverage area. And we'll talk about anything more custom you might need to do. That's totally optional. Out of the box, this will cover your room.
Yeah, potentially before the 910, you might have even run out of lobes. Maybe it wasn't enough to cover the area you wanted to. Now you can cover larger areas because they're just being the lobes are there just as needed. So you don't have to pre-plan how am I going to cover everything.
Yeah, so that means that for a lot of, let's call them standard rooms or basic rooms, you might not to do any configuration, might not need to do anything at all. The 30 by 30 might just be enough to cover the room perfectly and you're finished. So let's talk about though, what if you've got a room with a specific seating layout and maybe you want to cover certain areas and not emphasize other areas. If we go to the next slide, Cheryl, we can talk about the different types of coverage areas that there are and how you can assign those to different spots in the room. So for instance, Scott, how many different coverage areas can I have and where can I put them?
Well, again, starting with the simplest, one dynamic coverage area could cover your whole room. But if you are trying to tailor it more to pick up just what you want to pick up and maybe reduce the noises in areas that there are no talkers, you can have up to 8 different coverage areas. And we're looking at the GUI right now, which is a top-down view into your room. And it's as simple as just picking the areas you want to cover. There are 2 choices of what type of coverage you want. A dynamic coverage area is when, just like that initial out-of-the-box coverage area, as needed, when someone talks, boom, a coverage lobe is aimed at them. A dedicated coverage area is a 6 by 6 predetermined area, and that's used for areas that you just know you're going to want to cover, a lectern, a VIP seat, what have you. And you just go ahead and cover that, and then that is no longer part of that pool of lobes that are being recycled as needed in that larger dynamic area, or maybe multiple dynamic coverage areas. That way you never run out of lobes. Yeah.
Can you
I'm
do
so
this
sorry.
Particular arrangement when, for example, you've had like a, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm so very sorry to interject, gentlemen, but I know that we spent so much time trying to make sure that this audio was absolutely perfect for this demo, and we're getting a lot of comments, and I'm hearing it too, that the room and the audio in the room that you're in is kind of choppy. We're getting some weird sort of chopped kind of sound effects. So I just want to make sure that we have everything set correctly on your end, and just make sure that we're giving everybody the best audio experience here as possible.
It's like a little intermittent clicking, almost like a little chirp of static or something like that. It sounds like a network thing more than anything. I can't imagine it's something in the actual audio system there, because it wasn't there in any of our rehearsals, but perhaps it's one of those network things that just pops up.
Yeah, well, I know that for other rehearsals, this place was nearly empty, and today we do have, I don't know, 20 or 30 guests, so.
Kick them all out. No, I'm kidding.
Like if you want to continue listening.
Yeah, so apologies for that. What I was going to add to this slide that is up is that this is what you might want to do if you had a specific council and a podium in front of that council where you literally only wanted to pick up the council members and whoever was speaking from the podium and not pick up anything from the galley or the audience or the public areas. So for a specific reason, you might do something like this.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, speaking of specific reasons, Doug, let's go ahead to the next slide and let's talk about some typical seating layouts that you'd find in typical conference rooms and meeting rooms. And this is how you could approach it with either one or even multiple MXA920s. Take us through some of these and just explain the approach to each one of them here.
Okay, yeah, for large conference rooms, you might need 2 array mics as shown here, and that is so that you've got, relatively even distances from any given array for any of the participants. That might be an ideal way to cover that. Medium conference rooms, I would say, can be done in large part by just a single array and even reducing the 30 by 30 coverage just to the table area and maybe the, extra seating areas behind one of those rows. Video conferencing room here, I'm showing, 3 coverage areas, showing tables. Same with the classroom, kind of separate coverage areas on each of those, student tables. The reason I might do that versus one big student coverage area is perhaps just to be connected to a camera control system that listened to, for example, coverage area 1 or table 1. They've got a preset for that camera to go to those 4 students, for example.
Mm-hmm. So the point is that the 920 makes it easy to either just go with a big rectangle or a big square, or assign multiple rectangles for different areas of the room, depending on what you want to focus on and what you don't want to focus on. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we're configured in this room that you guys are in. I know we've got a diagram of this. Let's show people how we've got this particular room set up with coverage areas. If we can go to the next slide, Cheryl, we should be able to see that.
Great. And by the way, I listened into the webinar, and we are indeed experiencing packet loss. That is definitely has to do with the webinar itself and not any quality from the room. The setup of this room, by the way, is just MXA920s with onboard processing going into IntelliMix room, really only as a conduit to get to GoToWebinar. There's no processing going on at an IntelliMix room. It really is just a means to get to the PC running the webinar. And yeah, that kind of jitter you're hearing is exactly that. It's jitter from packet loss. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do anything about that. But the room that we're in right now, this is again is a top-down view, looking through the ceiling, through the microphone down. You haven't quite seen, but in the front of the room we have 2 displays and a lectern. But I'm at a table with Scott. I'm about 8 feet away from the microphone that's right over here, and Doug is about 16 feet over there. Now the way we have the mic configured, if you want to go to the next slide, is a dynamic coverage area covering Doug and myself. That's just one large dynamic. And then we made 3 dedicated areas. The one with the number 2 is covering the lectern. And then to prepare ourselves for a demo we're about to give, we've also covered the doorway entry areas of the room with dedicated coverage areas.
Great. So speaking of demos, let's let people hear how it sounds. And one of the things that comes up that we want to point out is that this automatic coverage scheme allows the microphone to pick up multiple talkers in multiple parts of the room at the same time. It's not like an array microphone that has a single beam pointing in one place or another and moving around. We're sort of pointing everywhere all the time if we need to be. So let's hear how that sounds. So let's have some double talk from you guys to let people know what happens when there are multiple talkers.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the mic can actually support up to 8 simultaneous talkers. We're just 2 in the room, so we'll demo what that sounds like. I'll just say the alphabet here while Scott talks as well. A, B, C, D,
1,
E, F, G.
2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
XRQT,
Okay, then. I think we did it.
Doug, some of your letters were out of order, so I need you to go back and redo that homework, please, and then hand it in again. Shades of third grade right there. That sounded really good. So this 920 lets meetings be fully interactive, and but the big question is, we talk about, well, covering certain areas, not needing to cover other areas. What about scenarios where there are some unwanted noises coming from certain parts of the room, either a doorway or an adjacent office area or a lounge or a break room or something like that? Obviously, I wouldn't just put a coverage area there because I don't want to hear it, but what if the noise from that is bleeding into the room and getting picked up by other areas? How does the MXA920 let me deal with that? This is really a clever solution.
Okay, yeah, so for starters, I'll have Scott do a little demonstration here from the corner here. He's over here in this dedicated area 3. Right now it's actually covered by the microphone, so let's first hear what this door sounds like just naturally.
Hi.
All right, that's just the natural door sound acoustically, and now I'm going to mute that area.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to unmute that area so we can, again, hear the natural sound of the door. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And one more time, I muted it.
Once again.
Okay, so that's the noise from the door. Now let's see, what if Scott is actually just talking in the corner? What do we naturally pick up when you're talking?
Yep, I mean, this is a covered area, so even if someone was presenting from this area, they'd be heard just as well as anywhere else in the room. But what happens, Doug? Don't do it. Are you going to mute me?
I'm going to mute you. So I muted you, and if you continue to talk, I'll probably, hear a little bit of you bleed through at kind of a low level.
Okay.
So while you do that, I'll keep talking.
So I really am talking.
When I pause, you probably fade away into the distance.
But,
and that will unmute you, and you're
I've
now
been talking this whole time, then go ahead and mute it again.
All right, we're going to mute you again, and you're continuing to talk. Okay, that was the that live demo portion. Back to you, Chris.
And I'm just checking my phone. Scott's wife called in. She says she wants to buy one of these. So there's that. Nice endorsement. So the muted coverage thing is actually a really clever approach to dealing with unwanted sounds, and it's actually part of the magic of IntelliMix that's built into the MXA920. And if you have experience going way back with Shure products, this is something that was also part of the SCMA10 automatic mixer, the SCMA20. There's an aspect of IntelliMix that lets it filter out unwanted sounds from muted channels. And Doug, maybe you can explain to us a little bit about how this is working in the MXA920.
Yeah, it shares that algorithm called MaxBus, where a given sound source will only be put through the mixer once. If it's picked up by 2 adjacent channels, it picks the better of those 2 channels. And by having a coverage area that I've actually muted, the algorithm is listening to that area, and it lets that into the mix to the point where it's deciding, what to let through or not. And it knows that that's supposed to be muted, and nothing else will pick it up. So that's why you only heard Scott kind of at a low level when I was literally talking in an open area.
So whatever coverage areas you've configured, however many lobes are active, however many people are talking, IntelliMix combines all that together seamlessly and gives you one pristine output mix with all the DSP features of IntelliMix, like acoustic echo cancellation, noise reduction, automatic gain control, EQ, and so on and so forth. But, and here's the but, what if I'm in a situation where I actually need individual outputs from all these different pickup areas because I'm doing some sort of multiple zone thing? We've actually thought of that, and you can turn off automatic coverage and use steerable coverage. So Cheryl, let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about that. Doug, or let's talk to Scott now. So if I don't want automatic coverage and need individual outputs, what does the 920 let me do?
Right, there might be plenty of cases, even if it's just you thoroughly enjoyed your experience with a 910, I don't want on a 920. Well, you're gonna get a 910 that sounds better then, because by turning off automatic coverage, the 920 performs, it looks and acts just like the 910 did. So now you do get individual channels with EQ, individual volume, and direct outputs from each of those channels, as well as more extended control over the automixer and that ninth automixed output.
Right, and now you can control lots of those gain controls and features on an individual channel by channel basis too, which is nice if you want more fine control of individual audio tracks. Now, let's talk about some of the applications that the 920 is used for, because, you know, in some cases, automatic coverage will be right, and in other cases, steerable coverage will be right. One of the ones that people are talking about a lot these days is using ceiling array microphones for voice lift or sound reinforcement. And Doug, we should define our terms here, because in a lot of cases, the marketplace and clients especially refer to any overhead microphone solution as voice lift, when really we're talking about something specific, right?
Yeah, so when we talk about voice lift, we're talking about a room with a bunch of people that any given person needs to be heard by everybody else in the room. Those that are right next to that person, of course, can hear without any help at all. Those that are on the opposite side of the room, 30 or 40 feet away, need a little bit of voice lift, meaning a lobe that's covering me would be sent not to a loudspeaker anywhere near me, but sent to the opposite side of the room, their bank of loudspeakers, so they can kind of hear me at a natural listening level. Whereas sound reinforcement is more where I've got a presenter at the front of the room being sound reinforced at kind of probably a higher level to the audience. So that's the difference there. And specific to the 920, when you're doing voice lift, you probably have multiple speaker zones, and when you do, you've got to be more discreet with which lobe goes to which zone, and so you probably turn off the automatic coverage, go into that steerable coverage so that you can very specifically put certain areas in certain speaker zones.
That's really what's exciting about the 920, is that you have this option to do many to many. We could go from the front of the room to the back of the room, and at the same time go from the back to the front, or left to right, or really as many speaker zones, and I guess with one microphone up to 8 different lobes, you could have 8 zones going to 8 speakers all simultaneously, which is not available with many other products out there.
Yeah, one of the applications, I know you worked on a couple of these, Scott, is like university lecture halls that have arrays that cover not only the teaching area, but also the student area, so that remote listeners can hear what the students that are local, what their questions are. So, you know, depending on how you set this up, you could have the professor sound lifted to the back of that lecture hall, as well as a student from the back row being able to be sound lifted to the teacher, so they don't have any problem hearing what the question is acoustically.
And even the front row not facing the back row sometimes can get voice lifted to the back of the room, so everyone heard the question. We do voice lift in this room here, and I have this pillar in the back of the room, and we do have people seated in the back of the room, and people on either side of this pillar actually can't hear each other. So we've actually set up voice lift so that this side of the room can hear this side of the room.
And we might point out when we were looking at our overview diagram of this room, that's one of the reasons why we have two MXA920s in this room, because sometimes we do experiments with multiple speaker zones and multiple microphones, or might have to demo that for clients who are going to use multiple microphones. So that's why we actually have the microphone offset to one side here, because in truth there are two of them. We're just only using one today. Now, another thing that I've noticed is while you guys are talking, the cameras are switching back and forth. We don't have any live camera operators there in the room, but I'm sure people are wondering, how are we orchestrating the camera tracking here? And specifically, how does the MXA920 provide data to an automated camera system? Who wants to talk about that? How about you, Doug? Or Scott? Either one. You can fight over it.
I was all excited. All right, no fighting. I'm the most effusive about this. We have set up camera presets through the camera system here that are being activated by voice. So it's voice-controlled tracking camera system. But what they are is that coordinates from the 920 are being sent to the camera system, which is then using intelligence to figure out what the best camera preset is to use for each of us. And so that's one of the most exciting camera controlling feature of the 920 is this coordinates of not just one, but every talker in the room, up to 8, I suppose, but all simultaneously, which is unique to our product. And so this is new. We've always given out automixer gating decisions on when someone talks, and you still get that. And now with the addition of coverage areas, you also get the automixer gating decisions of coverage areas. So all three of these are being sent simultaneously, these 3 different data points, for you to decide with your camera system what you'd like to take advantage of for really flexible camera control.
Yeah, so part of it depends on what your camera system is capable of and what type of data it needs. If it is just looking for lobe activity to drive certain presets, that's fine. But the point is the 920 gives you multiple options to configure a system that does what you want it to do, whether that's just sort of overview shots of different sections of the room, or maybe a more close-up shot of a couple of people or a certain person. Whatever you want to do, the mic can help you do it. And then if we go to the next slide, then of course there's just plain old AV conferencing, which a lot of people are doing as their primary and only activity in meeting rooms. And has become an essential business tool these days. The MXA920 is an outstanding solution for this, obviously. And of course, behind the scenes, we've been talking to all sorts of providers of collaboration tools to get the MXA920 and other Shure components tested for compatibility, certification, and so forth. It's already certified for use with Microsoft Teams, and we expect to be announcing additional certifications with other providers over the next several weeks and months, so you can be certain that the 920 is going to integrate seamlessly in your room with whatever platform your organization wants to work with. Let's see, what else should we talk about? What's on our next slide here? Oh, training. So if this webinar is not enough, our Shure Audio Institute folks have created some very comprehensive technical enablement training on the MXA920, which you'll find on the SAI webpage. You also might want to brush up on designer system configuration software, since that's the primary way that you'll be configuring MXA920s and other Shure components. And you can click on an MXA-oriented path that will show you all the courses relevant to MXA to make it a little bit more easy to find the ones that are the most relevant resources for MXA users. So there's plenty of information online. And of course, I always have to mention our award-winning applications engineering group, who's always standing by to answer your questions before, during, or after an installation. But I'm sure we haven't said everything. Cheryl, I'm sure some people have some questions, right? What sorts of questions do we have from our online audience?
Wow, do we have a lot of questions today. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the presentation here so you can all see our faces a little bit better. And let's dive into these questions. Okay. All right. Since we were just talking about cameras, I'm going to kind of start here at the bottom because we did have a couple of questions come in specifically about cameras. Specifically in the room that Doug and Scott are in right now, what camera systems are you using, and what allows you to do the tracking?
All right, I'll take this. It is a one beyond system that we actually have sort of two components. I mean, there's 5 cameras in the room. So above each display, we have 2 because we have split this room up into 2 sides for camera control and voice lift, which we mentioned. And like Chris said, in actual use of this room, because we use this internally as well as for customers, we do use 2 920s at the same time. So there's 2 sets of PTZ cameras in the front of the room that are being voice activated to recall presets. And that is using coordinates from all 16, yes, we are using, no, we are using automatic coverage, so I shouldn't say that. It's, you can have up to 16 talkers. And they're using all that data and deciding which camera preset to fire. When we go to the front of the room, there's a rear camera that actually typically is just in auto tracking mode. And that's just from motion and facial recognition. But switching between the rear and the front of the room is also voice activated. So the microphones are a major part of the system, but we kind of are doing a little bit of both: auto tracking, camera presets, camera switching.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump back up the top here, and we'll kind of dive through as many of these as we can. Next question, can the MXA920 be flush mounted?
Yeah, it can be flush mounted. It's still compatible with the A900 HCM or 910 HCM hard ceiling mount, and that would be a way to flush mount it in a hard ceiling. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that, Scott? That'd be my first thought.
That seems like the only use case to me, yeah.
All right. If you are inside of a coverage area but facing away from the microphone, will it still pick up your voice?
Okay, it will still pick up your voice. What it will pick up will sound like you're facing, the wrong direction. I can actually do that for you because I'm picked up right here, facing the mic, and I presume you're gonna drop a bunch of my low end or a bunch of my high end if I turn around. So I'll continue to talk facing away from the mic, and then you can judge for yourself. I'm not sure because we haven't heard how this comes across in the web tool, but yeah.
And I'll give you another example here at the lectern, where actually for this exact scenario is another reason why maybe perhaps you do want 2 microphones. When I face this side of the room, I'm facing the microphone and I sound as good as I can. But if I do face this way or even turn around and face the screen over here, you're going to hear that sort of higher frequencies, don't come out the back of your head. So we actually do have another 920 on the side of the room where I would sound equally as good if I face this side or this side.
Okay. How many channels of AEC does it need in the DSP?
In the DSP, so if you use an external DSP, typically it's you're just sending the echo canceled mix to one channel of a DSP.
Okay.
In the automatic coverage mode, there literally is just a mix out, so that's why it's one channel. If you turn automatic coverage off, then I guess it depends on what you need. You could use up to 8 channels if you were sending it to a third-party DSP with per channel echo cancellation.
Okay. If I have a room that is constantly being reconfigured with different table and chair layouts, do I have to reconfigure the coverage areas each time, or does it automatically adjust?
I would say it automatically adjusts, and that would be a perfect application of just set the coverage area to your room dimensions, then you know you've got guaranteed 100% coverage of the entire room, no matter where people are sitting, standing, lying down.
All right. Are these dynamic dedicated coverage area features only available on the 920, or are they also available on the 910?
Just on the 920.
Okay.
As we mentioned at the top, it is new technology built from the ground up, so it's not, it won't be a firmware update to the 910.
Okay. Do the automatic coverage areas allow for discrete channel outputs of those areas, or only an Automix option?
Just the Automix option. So you'll see in Dante Controller on the 920 that there are 8 outputs and a mix. However, those 8 outputs, those direct outs, those are available when the automatic coverage is turned off. You'll actually have content on those. Other than that, you might still see them in Dante Controller just to retain routing connectivity switching back and forth, but those will be silent basically when it's in auto coverage mode.
But what is interesting is that you can, with your 920, you have, just like with the 910, up to 10 presets that can be recalled by a control system. And one of those presets might be automatic coverage, and another one might be direct outputs. And you can recall those back and forth, and those Dante routes do get retained. And so maybe one application is voice lift and the other one doesn't need it. You know, one is that we don't know how they're going to set up their tables. We want automatic coverage. You can be ready for both.
Great. A couple of related questions here about multi-purpose room layouts. And I'll kind of present them all because they're all together. Can you set up coverage area profiles for multi-purpose room layouts? And is there a way to use a control system to recall these assignable coverage areas for multi-purpose rooms that will change with seating arrangements?
Sure, I guess that's what the presets would be able to do for you. So you sometimes see this on your touch screen where you've got kind of a visual image of what that room is going to be used for. We have this in our Niles facility where you can see classroom style, you know, U-shaped table, square, and you just press the one you want, and that's where the coverage goes per the layout of the room. And it's just recalling a preset.
Okay. I am needing to mic an auditorium. Yes, I am wanting it to mic back into the room. The advantage would be that the body packs would no longer be necessary and avoid speaker messing with them. Would this be possible with the 920?
It's audio, so it depends. You say auditorium, you know, how large, how reverberant, how loud is the HVAC? So all these factors need to take into account. But what's exciting about the 920 and it's being even more directional, lower in frequencies, is you have a much better chance of success of doing, let's start with sound reinforcement in an auditorium. Again, it would just be the instructor to the rest. It's just a one-to-many scenario. So you could maybe do some PAG-NAG or maybe some testing to see, but it would not be a waste of time to pursue that idea. Otherwise, it will depend on the room.
Yeah, and I think system support will help you with that. If you have, for example, the layout drawing of your room, I think system support has done this plenty of times before. It's just kind of modeled the room to help evaluate how many arrays might be needed to accomplish what you want to accomplish with, you know, some of the experience that they've had doing that.
Okay.
I did want to add that there's more chance of a success of doing voice lift, and Chris had mentioned defining our terms. You know, sound reinforcement is maybe more of what you were getting with a body pack, whereas voice lift kind of replaces what's lost over distance. So the back of the room might not feel like the instructor is amplified, but they can hear him. And then you might not even know it's happening until they turn it off, and then it's just like, oh, wow. And I've experienced that in a lot of rooms. So that's another avenue to pursue to see if that meets requirements. Will just voice lift work in this auditorium, or do you really need amplification?
Here's an interesting question. Can the 920 be used as a temporary tabletop device?
Temporary tabletop device. I haven't listened to it in that application, although I guess I have listened to it on my desk vertically, just because I didn't have the wherewithal to hang it in my office. other than the visual, aspect of it, I don't see why not, but I can't immediately picture that being a target application we are after. I think for that, we've got the MXA920, where we do have a nicely developed, flush to the table mount. That might be a better option for surface applications. You got any ideas additional?
Perhaps when you say you couldn't imagine, maybe our viewer is imagining that the mic is not 2 feet by 2 feet, which it is. The round is the same size as the square. You might not catch that from our glamour shots.
Might be a little big on the middle of the table. All right. What about speaker placement? I guess specifically in the room where you are, where in relation to the 920s are they?
They are in the adjacent diagonal tile of the one that you've been listening to. And then there's another distant one that's like at least 12 feet away. But the nearest loudspeaker is, within 2 feet.
Okay. Does the 920 provide easier configuration capabilities versus the 910, where I might not necessarily need to involve an integrator?
Let's see. It is very easy to set up, and in fact, some of the beta testers of the 920 have actually said this sounds better with the default settings than my current mic after someone's spent a day tuning it. I don't think that was a Shure branded mic, however.
Right. The only thing that you do have to do is get the sound out of the microphone. We provide a Dante digital audio over Ethernet protocol. But after you've connected Dante to whatever is further down the chain, you don't have to do anything out of the box. So I don't know that I recommend not using an integrator. They bring a lot more to the table than just setting up your mic. But to answer your question, yeah.
All right. With the 910, we've been putting two arrays along for a long table. Would you still recommend putting 2 of these arrays of the 920, or would a single one in the center of the table suffice? The room width is 13 and a half feet, length 23 and a half feet, height 8 foot 4 inches.
All right, let's see if Scott and I have different answers for this, because I do think one array will definitely cover the room. However, I think most of these rooms have video on one wall or another. And when people are specifically talking toward the video, that would be where I would recommend having an array that's really biased toward that end of the room, so that the high frequency content is still able to be captured very well. So one will work, and I think you'll be more pleased with 2 because of how often people will be talking toward the video. I'll see if Scott's answer is any different or nuanced.
Not nope as in nope. Nope, I agree.
Oh.
Doug, that's an excellent point. And we demonstrated earlier what it sounded like when we turned our heads away. Well, when the microphone is behind you, then you're going to experience the same loss of higher frequencies, because higher frequencies don't. We talked about low frequencies with the directional pickup of the mic. Low frequencies actually kind of do maybe go behind your head, but not the higher ones. And this goes for any microphone, not just ours.
That's how physics works, right? All right. Next question. You mentioned it handles different ceiling types, but what about no ceiling, such as a high ceiling TV studio or industrial warehouse?
Okay, well, that's where the pole mount or the threaded rod or the gripple mount with hanging wires, if you can get that array down to the 9 or 10 foot point, that's where it'll begin to be optimized, rather than hanging from 15, 20 feet in an open ceiling.
Though it would perform, it would sound like it would sound. But there's no problem with not having this mic near a boundary, and it totally rejects sound from behind. So if there was loud HVAC up behind it, the mic would greatly reduce that. So it is pretty exciting to have a product in high ceilings like this.
Okay. How do you deal with the camera steering when multiple people are talking?
Well, we don't deal with that. We might advise, but that is actually up to the customer or the camera system to decide what to do. We provide the data for it. So, so camera control is not a feature. Our feature is we provide coordinates, we provide gating activity, of our Automixer that is obviously voice activated and works really well. I might add, especially with the wearing masks, this is a lot of camera companies really need that. So multiple talkers, we send out multiple coordinates, we send out multiple gating decisions, and as I think we didn't mention earlier, what's cool is a camera system might say, well, I understand that one person is talking and I know where, and they put a shot and I get my own rectangle. Two people are talking. Perhaps they go to a split screen and you get to see the two people go back. Now 3 people are talking. All right, maybe now we go to a wide shot of the room, et cetera. But that's a choice that the customer and the camera system make.
Fantastic. Will the 920 fit into the 910 hard lid mount?
Yes.
Okay. Are there recommendations for Max RT60 and NC for the room in which the mic is installed?
I guess the better sounding the room, the better the result will be, but I don't think there is a max. I think what we could say is this is probably the best performing mic you could put into any particular situation. So it would be the recommended one. I would say when the room gets, quote unquote, worse and worse, that's where the distance of the loudest, the furthest talker that you find acceptable might be reduced. Like right now, I'm, like I said, like 16 feet away from this. If it was not as good of a room, maybe that doesn't sound as good at 16 feet, for example.
Okay. Are there new features in the 920 versus the 910 that can help with the liveliness or reverb in a room?
There are. I mean, there are, well, I guess noise reduction was already part of the 910. I think that does help significantly. I think a lot of the algorithms they share actually do help reduce the room noise significantly. The last thing I think I'd say is that the low frequency directionality improvements of the 920 that's been the reaction we've heard from people, that they hear less room with the 920 than they did with the 910 by comparison.
Okay. What is the ideal footprint or FOV for active and muted zones?
For active and muted zones, I might need a little bit of detail on the question, unless you have an.
I don't either. I'm going to guess, but if someone can clarify, is it is true. You're going to find some point of like, we can't laser point that you are muted and you are unmuted, within a couple of inches. But so, and this is actually a kind of a new avenue that we've been exploring since we've been able to get our hands on the 920. But I've found to me that there does need to be some sort of gap that's not necessarily reliable. I think we were going to even demonstrate, did we not? When you speak of a gap, we have a gap between our lectern and the door. If you remember the drawing that we showed earlier, that isn't necessarily needed. It's just kind of how we configured the room today. But since I brought it up, I'll go demonstrate what I'm talking about this.
That'd be great, because somebody did ask. I was kind of holding a series of questions of things they want you to do, and one of them is, can we hear someone talking while pacing across the room? So I think this might kind of hit that question as well.
Well, actually, the room's not set up for that. If again, we have a coverage dedicated, so we only have a 6 by 6 foot area covered here at the lectern, and then again over here at the door. So this whole 6 by 6 foot area over here is covered, but in the middle it's not. And I just wanted to show you what that sounded like if I do go here. So when I talk here, now I'm in between the 2 areas over there, but my sound should be greatly reduced. In fact, potentially, maybe I need to repeat what I just said. You potentially did was not even intelligible. But that's not an example of how you can walk around. A better example of that, Doug, actually would be you walking around in the covered area.
Yeah, I presume that I think if I recall right, this table and this table are all in one particular zone, and I don't know the edges because we didn't tape them out. So I'll walk around Scott's section. I'm going to guess that this is getting close to the edge of this area, and now I'm going to walk back the other way. Now I'm facing away from the mic, so you'll hear my high end probably go away, and when I'm facing again, I presume you get it back. I'm taking a guess as to where that zone was. And that's actually case in point why you want to be very careful to make a decision to create a specific zone of coverage, because that in doing so, you create a zone of uncoverage, or whatever we want to call that. And for this room, I might default to say, we always want to hear everybody, or maybe I'll have a preset where it's literally, I want to hear none of the audience and only the presenter, and occasionally turn on the audience if there's remote listeners.
Okay. And then since we're doing more making you guys walk around and do things, somebody was asking if we could open the door while someone is talking on the other side of the room.
Open the door while someone's talking. So I'll be the somebody talking. Okay. And so then, yeah, presuming, I think we still got this unmuted.
For comparison, let's hear what it sounds like when this is unmuted. So this is how loud the door would be unmuted. So go ahead and talk.
So while I'm talking, you'll get a relative sense to how loud or not loud the door was when I'm kind of talking at my normal level. And then I think what Scott's doing at the computer there is just muting that coverage area, kind of creating a different preset that is going to now mute the door. Yes. So, okay, exactly. Do the same thing while I continue to talk, and we will listen to the door. Check, 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 check. Okay, I hear it acoustically close while I'm talking. I presume you hear it a little bit, but maybe a lower level than before.
What was probably hard is that the camera didn't switch. It was only on you, so you couldn't see that the door opened and shut, but we did do it. How was that?
Awesome. All right. It's obviously hard to convey this virtually, but could you give some info about the acoustics of the room this demo is happening in? One of the things we often battle is acoustic reflections in rooms that aren't treated well, and they can't address that for logistics or aesthetic reasons. Wondering how this would behave if in those scenarios and contextually what I'm listening to in this demo.
We've got 2 treated walls, and we also have 2 completely hard walls. So it's actually a well-behaved room. Drop tile, carpet, it's pretty well-behaved.
And it is very quiet.
Yeah.
Okay. We still have a lot of questions, so we're going to have to unfortunately cut this short and not get to all of these questions, but I think what we'll do is maybe confer as a team and offer sort of a follow-up on any of the unanswered questions. Or if you have a question that you just cannot wait, you can go to shure.com/contact to fill out a form and get in touch with that award-winning support team that my friend Chris was discussing. Again, that's shure.com/contact. It's a great way to open up a ticket with our support team. They can answer so many questions across so many different audio topics. So please feel free to open up a ticket with them and utilize that fantastic resource that we have here at Shure. And I'm going to wrap things up with sort of this last question that I get from a lot of people, which is, can we get the slides? Can we get this webinar, the recording? And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we will have a recorded version of this webinar. We need to edit it a little bit, but once it's ready, it will be available at shure.com/webinar. That's shure.com/webinar. Again, it takes us about a week, but I will also send a follow-up email to everyone that registered with the direct link once it is available. So with that, I think we'll close this out today. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you learned a little something about the MXA920. I know I certainly did. And we hope to see you on the next one. Have a fabulous day, everybody.